Hi everybody, this is Chris with CodeChris.com, and one of the things that I wanted to touch on today was why I made a career change into coding. If you're watching this video, it's most likely because you're either on the fence about changing careers, or you're really brand new to the field, or you're somebody who made a career change yourself and you're really trying to justify, like, did I make the right choice, did I whatever. So obviously I can't tell you any of those things, but I can go ahead and share my story with you, and you can compare it and see how it works, and if you can validate whatever you're thinking about doing. So with that being said, I've been teaching myself code since about a little over 2.5 years ago, is when like coding side of things began. But my story actually starts way before that. So like I said, I ran a sole proprietorship. I learned a lot of entrepreneurial and business skills. And a sole proprietorship, for those of you who don't know, it's basically just a small company. Without getting into all the boring tax stuff, it's just a way of separating. It's just a way of having you put a name, so you're not just, Chris Marlowe. Instead, I was Marlowe Animation, right? And there's just other things you can do with it. Not the point of this video. When I was running my own sole proprietorship, there was a lot of skills that I acquired, right? And that was management, that was organization, that was learning taxes, that was a whole bunch of things. What was happening in the industry in the last couple years, and it's going to be a continuing trend, is that particular field, and I think that just the art field in general, with the more the net kind of expands and the more the internet grows, I think the art field in general just is viewed as something that's just cheaper to consume, right? That there isn't really necessarily work behind it, so the cost is justified in the minds of the consumer as not needing to be as high. You have things like 99 designs, and they just kind of, really don't help the craft at all, or really help the artists, right? And that's a whole different thing I won't get into. The point is that for my field, in the animation side of things, I was seeing that majority of my work was freelance and contracting, and I work in a studio, but I'd be a contractor. And the thing is that is becoming more and more the common practice. And I suspect that given 10 years, 20 years, it's going to be even more of a thing. And ultimately, it's hard to compete on price with some of the jobs that are being outsourced overseas. So that's just the nature of it. And there are definitely some people overseas who do really fantastic works, fantastic job, and ultimately they're just willing to work for a little bit less. There's a number of options that I had for my field. Either A, I could stay in the field and do what I was doing, which was basically competing on quality. I was competing on communication because I spoke English very well and was able to understand what the person was communicating with me as far as the client's needs, as far as what their expectations were, and as well as me giving feedback on to that. That was helpful and set me above some of the competition. But the other thing was also price. So obviously I can justify a higher cost, but I did see that it was becoming increasingly more important to kind of, knock it down a little bit, because at a certain point, a budget's a budget and a price is a price, and for them, they could have a couple people do the same amount of work, or even more work, and even if it's wrong, they still have that budgeting to get it right. And that's a whole thing as far as running your own business that should probably talk about. My first choice was to stay in the field and work that way. Now the problem with that is I realized that I'm trying to think ahead, right? Because I'm getting engaged, I'm gonna get married, all this stuff, have kids, and I'm trying to think about the future, and I'm wondering, what is it gonna look like in the future? I can continue to work for myself, and the competition is going to get a little bit more difficult. It's going to be a little bit more difficult to find clients. It's going to be a little bit more competitive, and rates might change a little bit. And the amount of time to acquire a new person, the amount of time to look for a new position might become a little bit longer over time. And there were things like that I was seeing and it just has to go with the nature of the field. It's a global marketplace. I was seeing that, and I was wondering, okay, what are my other options? The other options were to take more of a managerial approach. So towards the end of my sole proprietorship, what I actually ended up doing more so is I took more of a management position. So I would actually be hiring some people to help aid me in some of the work, and I would do majority of it, maybe they can help with some assets, or they can help with some other things. And so I wanted to do more of that. So I ended up doing more of that managerial kind of role. So that was good though, because I learned a lot about hiring people. I learned a lot about the common things that I had heard about my field in general, and that was just something that I had to do, right? Because I could justify doing more projects and doing less actual upfront cost when I was doing the work as the craftsman. The thing is that as I started taking more of this managerial role and managing people and projects, it was less about the art. It was less about actually doing the craft. And the craft, doing the actual work, is actually what I enjoy. And that's a whole thing too, when your clients want to keep changing things, but they also, maybe they don't have the budget to create something as creatively awesome as you would like to. And there's certain expectations that just, they're all over the place. So that's what I'll talk about on this channel, as far as my experiences, things that I found interesting, and then a lot of that stuff actually does come over to code, because, whether you're teaching yourself, whether you're working as a freelancer, whether you're working for a company, a lot of those skills are going to transfer over. And I'll go into that stuff later. But I digress. Back to the point. And so the other option was to look at the industry honestly and what was expected of me. The other thing too is that I don't want to discourage anybody from doing the field. If you do motion graphics or animation, like, that's awesome. I love that stuff. I mean, that's what I wanted to do for a very long time. And the thing is that for me, I had just a lot of debt. I was getting married, a lot of debts going on, and just, I have to be honest with myself, for the next 10 years, what do I see? The next 20 years, and where do I want my time to be spent, right? How do I want my time to be split with my family and my work life and my entrepreneurial life and all that stuff, right? So for me, this is kind of how it works, and I probably do want to be clear that there's nothing wrong with the art field in the traditional sense. I'm just saying that if you do have massive amounts of debt, you should really think about what works and what doesn't work. And it's irrelevant to say how we got to so much debt or how that all happened or who's to blame. The point is, how do you address the problem and how do you try to fix it? For the future, I've got things that I want to incorporate from my education, from the animation side of things, and this brings us into coding. You see, so what I started to realize was that things that are booming, things that do have a future, are definitely going to be things involved in the programming, the coding side of things, websites and software and cybersecurity, right? Those are all things that for the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, there's going to be more of a need for them, right? And unless you're interested in it, that field might not necessarily populate more. It might sort of stagnate at a certain point. The other thing too is I also saw that a lot of people were consumers versus producers, which is great because I want to produce more things, right? But a majority of, for example, on YouTube, of YouTubers, they consume content versus spitting it back out. And that's fine. That's awesome. I mean, heck, I need an audience, right? But it was encouraging to me because it showed me that there was a gap. There was a spot that I could jump into the marketplace, that I could into this market and find my niche, find my personality, my experience can help others, and essentially I can start to form that into a business that will have product of some kind, right? So I took a look at software, and I have a friend who does that kind of stuff. The problem is that going into it, I am not the kind of smart guy that I thought was necessary in order to be in this field. I thought you need to have a 4-year university degree. I thought you need to know computers inside and out, and all even to the extent that I thought you're just typing a bunch of gibberish and you have to know what it means, ones and zeros and then special symbols and stuff. It was not at all what I expected to be nearly as easy as it actually was. The thing was that another thing that I thought was encouraging was, I found a lot of these people from the past, from history, and they taught themselves how to code, right? They didn't have the internet. They didn't have the tools that we have today. Instead, they just had a book, a manual, and if that, some of them just kind of hacked away and figured it out. And all I could think about in my head was the fact that, we have a lot more resources today than they did. and they became successful, and they were able to teach themselves. So what I did is I went to the library. I went to the library and I got a big fat JavaScript book, and I would just read through it, right? And I read it essentially like it was a book, and I was determined to not stop until I understood how this worked. Well, then I needed more money. I needed to offset costs and everything else, with all this management, doing more of the coding stuff. So I ended up getting a full-time job at a call center. It was not the best. It was not the most fun, I will say that. But what I did do is I was able to go and between calls actually read. So I was reading. And for me, you got to understand, this is like a big change, right? Working for yourself, doing a field that you really enjoy, to working at a call center and, doing what you got to do to, get the money to come in, to pay for bills and prepare for things. And you do what you got to do. Well, so here I am at the call center, and I'm using that time in between calls to read this book, open up Notepad, because remember, I'm still new at this field. I don't know text editors are a thing. And open up Notepad on my computer, and I'm looking at like the code inside the back end of the website that we manage, and doing all this stuff. And people thought I was hacking, and far from it. But I was just on Chrome and inspecting the website, right, or inspecting the code. And also I found that there was really bad code practices that I was seeing, and but more importantly, I was starting to understand what I was seeing. And if you haven't seen The Matrix, you should really see The Matrix. It came out when I was a kid, but so I saw it when it was initially out. But there's probably some people watching who are on the younger side and didn't see The Matrix, but you may have heard about it. You should really watch it. And there's a really good scene that explains it perfectly. At a certain point, things were starting to click. And I remember it very fully, essentially like that guy when Neo is talking with the other dude and they're looking at the code. And it's just the lines of code just coming down. And he's like, oh, I just see, red dress here, person here, dog there, right? But that's kind of true. That's kind of what happens. At a certain point, it just starts clicking and starts making sense. And you can look at code and you can be like, oh, okay, this does this, this does this, this does this. And it's almost like you're learning a brand new reading language. And you'll be able, and just like when you're learning a language, it's easier when you're reading it versus when you're writing it. There's grammar when you write it, but when you're reading it, things are much easier. So I was doing all this in the background, and eventually I was able to get another job a little bit closer to the field I wanted to work at, where they do a lot of automotive stuff. And I was able to work on the IT side of things. So I got to mess a little bit with electronic stuff, right? So at least it was more along the lines as opposed to a call center kind of a thing. Oh no, not even. I wasn't even there yet. No. So after that, I ended up being like, okay, I want to do more of my sole proprietorship stuff, right? I just gotta get that. And so I was, oh no, man. Before that, I had to work at another place where I was doing the part-time work. Was at a place called Dottie's, and that was just to get some part-time additional cash in there while I was doing my sole proprietorship, just to get some extra little bit of something, right? Because you have like your super busy times, you have your not so busy times. Super busy times, right? And I just need a little bit more of steadiness, right? So then I do the telephone stuff, blah. Then I go to Continental, and once I'm there, then I go ahead and get to do some awesome work for real companies, like car companies, right? So you're talking Dodge, Nissan, blah 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 blah, whatever. So the point is, I got to work a little bit with the software and sort of see how things were working, but not that much. But what I did do is I continued my education in the background. This whole time, I'm just taking my free time, taking whatever opportunity I have, whether it's driving, whether it's commuting, whether it's doing whatever it is, listening to a podcast, listening to a talk, listening to an education thing, whatever the case was, I was always learning code. I was thinking code. I was practicing code, whatever the case was, during that time. Then, fast forward a little bit, but during my time over there, I start to find opportunities at Continental to, mess with some actual programming. And they use Excel for a lot of stuff. So I learned and taught myself Visual Basic. And that was another thing too, is I basically built the confidence to be like, hey, I can learn any programming language now. It doesn't matter. I can learn any single programming language. I just need to learn the syntax, and there's plenty of ways to learning that online. So I taught myself Visual Basic, or VB script, right, which is used on the back end to do some cool stuff or whatever. And so I taught myself that to help with some annoying tasks that we had to do. All the while in the background, I'm working on my other stuff, and I'm just absorbing whatever knowledge I can, understanding programming, understanding all this, whatever I can, when I can, and all that. I started applying to work. And I started applying for a while, even honestly before I was quite ready. But the way I figured it is, worst they can say is no. And so I got a lot of phone interviews. I got a few face-to-face interviews. And ultimately, then I got my first job. And that's where I'm at right now. And everything's great about it. Fantastic. So not going to complain. But it was really interesting to sort of see how all this set up, and how all this was, just one gigantic journey, right? And it's still not done, because you see, even though I'm in the industry now and I have a job now, things could change, right? I don't know what might happen in the future, and so I should still be learning new things, learning new pieces of my craft. But more importantly for me, my ultimate goal is to get to the point where I can work for myself again, where I can build things that I want to build. And that's probably what's different, is as I started getting more and more into code, I started to realize there's a freedom to it. There's a sense of absolute freedom that you can do anything at a certain point. Like, if you can imagine something, you can code it. You can just build an app, a software piece, a website that does whatever it is you can possibly imagine. Nothing's impossible, only difficult to do. But the means by which you're able to find that information with the internet, it's really easy. It's cheap. And compared to a four-year university or whatever, yeah, I didn't have the luxury of choosing a four-year university, and I'm kind of glad, because it forced me to really focus and think hard about what I was learning and if it made sense or didn't make sense. So I don't know what your background is, what field you're coming from, whatever the case is. I would love to hear your story, right? If you changed careers, or you're thinking about changing careers, what's holding you back, right? Why are you changing careers? And I think that's something that you should really think about, as far as why. The why is more important, right? If there's something about the field you're in that you enjoy, what is it about the field that you enjoy that you want to take with you, right? Or why is it you're even considering, if you enjoy something about that you're taking away with you, right? Yes, I enjoy and love animation, and I love doing all that, but I also wanted to create stuff for myself. I wanted to bring things together for myself, and that's really where I had the most fun. The most fun was building my own things, and that's what coding allows me the opportunity to do. Is I can take that animation, I can take those ideas, I can take something brand new, combine it all together, and I can release that as a product. I can release that as a thing. And then at that point, I'm working for myself. I'm building things that I want to build and selling them, right? And people get to see it, and they can experience it how they see fit, but I will be able to build what I want to build, as opposed to having to build something for somebody else. And I think that's what's going to be different about this time, is that my entrepreneurial side is thinking more about, hey, let's build something that you want to build, as opposed to working specifically just on your craft. Because the craft side is fun, but combining the craft with the creativity and the directing and putting that all side together, that's what I enjoy. And with the coding side, I can build an app, I can build a software, I can build a game, I can build a whatever that allows me to utilize that artistic skill combined with the creativity allowed in programming, and push it all together into one piece. And if you're an artist right now and you're like, okay, there's really not a lot of art in code, there's not a lot of creativity in code, I assure you there is. And all you need to do is just, once you start understanding it, you start to realize the opportunities available to you as an artist. As an artist, code is much more beneficial to you than maybe somebody who's strictly logical thinking. Because as an artist, you already have the mindset to build crazy things, or you've already been brainstorming about like, oh, they should really make a thing that does this. Wouldn't it be great if we can just whatever? And you have design in your background, and you have the creativity. So I would encourage you to look at it. And if you're somebody who's strictly logical thinking, I would still encourage you to actually look at the artistic side of things. Really take a look at color theory. Take a look at, drawing and why things are done a certain way. Take a look at different artistic periods. When you actually find out about the art behind it, it's really, really fascinating. And you'll be surprised how much your code can actually change just from the abstract thinking of how things are grouped together, how things are important, and just laying things out graphically. The line between web designer and web developer is pretty much being pushed into one thing, right? Back end, front end, they're becoming one thing. You're gonna be full stack, right? Like, we just know this is the future of things. We have to be honest with where the industry is going, where the field is going. What is it leaning towards? What is it leaning against? One thing that I'm going to be doing much better of up front is keeping tracks of what I'm seeing in the industry and trends that I'm expecting for the future, right? Because I want to stay current, I want to stay with it, and I want to make sure that I don't fall behind the times. And if I ever fall, I can always catch back up, because things are changing so fast. I don't want to make that a deterrent for anybody brand new to the field, but seriously, if you're thinking about changing careers, now's a good time. It's a fantastic opportunity at the moment. There's a lot of free resources online. I'll bring up a couple you can go ahead and use as well. And if nothing else, I would suggest go ahead and check out, a website like Codecademy, or any of those websites that have like free trials for like a week. But I'd really start at Codecademy, and the reason why is because you'll type in a few words, and within a few minutes, I would argue, you'll really start to be like, this is interesting, this is cool. Or you'll be like, yeah, this is really boring. This is like math class all over again. This is not what I'm interested in. Maybe you shouldn't judge the whole thing on a few minutes of work, but I think if you're going to enjoy it, you also will be gravitated towards it very quickly. And you won't have to invest money or significant amounts of time. So, but seriously though, if you do have a background story, if you do have an origin of some kind in regards to the coding field, I'd love to hear it. I'd really enjoy those stories. Send a link to your video in the comment section. That's fine too. But I always do like to hear where people come from, where their backstory is, and how they got into coding, because it's always more interesting too when you see something that's totally unrelated and they get into code, or why they got into code, right? Was it because of money? Was it because of freedom? Was it because of, just the craft itself? Was it because of the creative opportunities? Was it because you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Was it because you wanted to build your own blah, 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 blah? Whatever the case is, really, 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 really want to know. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day, and I will see you later.